Good evening, everyone. Welcome along. This is Space Dave Live, episode number 24. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm just checking to make sure everything's going. I think it is all going fine. So let's check out our team tonight. Helping us out, we have the lovely Angela over there. Thanks for coming along and helping tonight, Ange. And as you can already see, our beautiful studio audience. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for coming along tonight. So let's get stuck straight into it, shall we? We will have a look at what we've got in store for tonight. So standard fare, really, introduction, competition, housekeeping, news that will include, but will not be limited to those things there. We'll have a look at some rocket launches, the attempted Vikram landing on the moon, some stuff about space traffic, a few things about Mars tonight, and just various other bits and pieces. We'll have a quick look at what's in the night sky tonight. Not much to look at there, but we will have at least a quick mention. And throughout the night, of course, we will hope to have some questions and discussion and some live chat. So let's see, the competition. Let's get stuck straight into the competition. This is the question for tonight. So if you got to name the first space station designed for tourists, what would you call it? We're going to be talking about that a little bit later. It's not a huge story, but we will be talking about that. So we want you to come up with a name for a space station that might look something like the picture there. So as always, you want to enter the competition. You have to do it live. So if you're watching the recorded show, you're too late. You can't enter the competition if you are not watching it live. Now, while I think about that, a reminder to Facebook viewers in particular, Facebook shows the show as if it was live even when it's not, for some time afterwards. I'm not quite sure how long it clicks over to the recorded version, but the time right now is 7:01 on Wednesday night. If that's not the time, you are watching from the future. So just bear that in mind as you're watching the show. And that also may be if you are posting comments on Facebook and you're not sure why they're not showing up in the system and why we're not seeing it, it could be because you are not actually watching it live. So it's a little bit of a frustration when, the way Facebook does that, but there's not much we can do about it. So just enter the competition by writing comp and then what your entry is. And the prize for tonight, we've got another one of these to give away. These buildable space vehicles, Lego compatible, donated by Janet Yort. Thank you again, Janet, for your donation there, and we might throw something else little in with it as well. So you can enter the competition anytime you like, or you might like to wait until we've actually talked about that thing later on before you enter. So there you go. A couple of other quick housekeeping things. Of course, we've got to mention our Patreon page. If you'd like to support the show and help keep us going financially, that's how you do it. Or if you have trouble or you don't want to do it on Patreon, just contact us and we will organise how we can take your money from you. Tonight we have a special thank you to one of our regular viewers, Casey Hesp. Now Casey actually won the competition recently, but very kindly donated the prize back to us and went one up and actually sent us a prize for us. He sent us one of those Lego Mars rovers there and said that we could either give it away as a prize or we could keep it for ourselves. So I went for the selfish option and kept it for ourselves. That is now part of our Lego display. So thanks, Casey. It looks awesome in the Mars base Lego display that we are currently working on. So we're always looking for more Lego. If anyone wants to give us any Lego, we're always keen on Lego. Now, there's one more thing. I think just a quick update on the show itself. So, of course, we didn't have a show last week, and we won't have a show next week either. As I mentioned in the last show that we did do, we are looking at doing the show fortnightly, just for a little bit, hopefully, and then we'll reevaluate. I won't go over all the reasons why again, but that is the situation. Just for now, we are just doing it fortnightly. But as I have already said, we're definitely hoping to get back to doing it weekly at some stage in the future. So keep an eye on the spacecentre.nz/live page, and I will post any updates there about what's happening with the whole show. So there we go. That is the housekeeping stuff. Let's have just a quick check-in with the chats before we go any further. So that's interesting. The Facebook has not connected. Wonder why that is. Facebook. Anyway. Welcome along to the people on YouTube live there. So who we've got? Just Gaming 6. Welcome along. Casey, John, Aroha, Isaac, Poison Toad, Ellen. I hope you guys are feeling okay, Ellen. Actually, you're not. I know you're not feeling okay, but I hope you get better soon. So welcome along, everyone. I don't. Ange, can you see the Facebook chat? So
it's not coming up.
It's not coming up. Okay. Well, that's interesting. The Facebook the video is working though, isn't it?
Well, I can't tell now because
Oh,
I'm doing it for them.
Okay, so what's that? Sorry?
Video's working.
The video is working. Thanks. Our audience is telling us that the video is working on Facebook, but for some reason we are not seeing your comments. Honestly, I know that you guys like watching it on Facebook, but from our end, Facebook just does not work anywhere near as well as YouTube for this sort of thing. So anyway, that's what you get for watching it on Facebook instead of YouTube. I'm getting mixed up. Let's talk about some space news, shall we? And we'll just get on with things. So what have we got tonight? We've got a few things to talk about, but let's get started with our launch schedule. So we've had 3 launches that we will have a quick look at that's, since our last show, and a few scheduled ones up there. Let's start by talking about the Iranian one. Now this happened just after our last show. If you'll recall, at the last show I showed you these couple of pictures. So this is the launch pad in Iran, and on the left there, this was an older picture of it, and then one just before it was due to launch, we think. So of course it's all very secretive. It's a little bit hard to know exactly what's going on there, but these images were provided by a commercial satellite imaging company called Planet Labs, and that's what it looked like. And obviously there's a bit of a paint job, and they were getting all ready to launch, and that was due to go about the day after the last show, I think. Well, just after that, Planet Labs released this picture of the launch pad where everything seems to be on fire. So that's not good, is it? That's not what you're hoping for. So yeah, you can see all the smoke billowing up there, and just it's not looking like it's supposed to at all. So doesn't look like it went too well for them. Now, interestingly, just after this, President Trump tweeted out this picture. So it's a much closer, much higher resolution picture of the launch pad with a whole bunch of annotations there, so we can see the damage and various bits and pieces. But it's actually quite interesting just talking about this image and or how this came to be. So first of all, it appears that this picture was taken by a phone or a simple camera of a screen. So you can sort of see in the middle there, you can sort of see a reflection that appears to be from a flash perhaps, and maybe the reflection of a person taking the photo. So President Trump didn't really say anything about the image itself. He basically just said this wasn't us that did this, and he actually wished the Iranians all the best with their rocket program. But this picture caused quite a bit of reaction and angst, really, because this is from a United States surveillance satellite. This is kind of supposed to be secret, really. It's not the sort of thing that you expect the President of America to be just randomly tweeting out images from a highly classified spy satellite. So people were wondering what on earth was going on here. No one really knows whether the intelligence people knew that he was going to do this or not. We suspect they probably were taken by surprise, but it does kind of appear that maybe they had a little bit of input. In the top left there, you see something looks like it's been redacted there, but it was very surprising, to say the least, that he tweeted this out. So people all around the world have been jumping on this and seeing what they can glean from this and what they can figure out. So first of all, we know where this launch pad is, and well, you can use the shadows actually, so you can see some shadows in there, so you can use that as a clock to know exactly when it was taken. So first of all, the first thing you can do, there's a bunch of people around the world who track satellites, and the surveillance satellites from the US military, they're secret, of course, but people suspect that some of them are satellites. Some of them we know come from the US military, some we're not really sure about. But by figuring out what time this photo was taken, people were able to confirm that one of the satellites they suspected was a US surveillance satellite definitely is. So they figured out which satellite in particular took this. So from now on, we know that that particular satellite, as it orbits the Earth, is indeed a US surveillance satellite. The other thing is it tells us quite a bit about the capability of that satellite. So you can see the resolution of this. It's been figured out that this has got about a 10 centimetre per pixel resolution. So that tells everyone how capable these satellites are. Now, I cannot imagine for 1 minute that the US intelligence community is stoked about this. I'm sure there's a lot of hand-wringing going on behind the scenes here, so it's been quite fascinating, really. So there you go. go. We now know a little bit more about this particular satellite. To be fair, I don't think it's really revealed anything that people didn't sort of suspect already. We already knew a bit about, or kind of knew a little bit about these satellites. I've got a couple of notes here. It's the KH-11 spy satellites. Apparently they are quite large telescopes in space, quite similar to the Hubble Space Telescope, in fact, but pointing back towards the Earth. So there you go. For whatever reason, President Trump has decided to share that with us. And, well, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. You can keep on revealing all your secrets as long as you like, President Trump. That's not going to bother me, but I'm sure a few people will be just a little bit concerned about exactly why he did that, because there doesn't seem to be any reason for tweeting that image. Anyway, so that was the Iranian attempt at launching it. It actually looks like this accident happened before the launch attempt, perhaps during the fueling up or something. We don't really know. And I think that's about all we want to say about that. Now I'm just quickly going to check the chats over here because a couple of people are commenting on the Facebook things. Thanks, Ange, for commenting as well. So Facebook is working. Sorry, we can't see your comments.
Yeah, I'm starting to read some.
So Ange is starting to see some of them now. So we'll check in with Ange. Now, O'Neill's one is suggesting, how about logging out and back into Facebook? I tell you what, unfortunately with the widget that we use here that looks like this, it doesn't actually work like that. My system here is just supposed to happen automatically and I don't actually have any way to log out and back in. But never mind, we should be able to check in with Ange and she can at least pass on your comments even if we can't see them. Right, so we had a look at that launch. There's a couple of other launches that we just quickly wanted to talk about. Not too much with these ones. Let me just get a quick video here. The next one was the Russian one. So let's have a look at this. I'll actually just show you the video. There's a little bit of audio with this. Now this was the GEO IK2 Geodesy satellite. So this is a science mission. All I've got here is just a couple of views of the launch. But this is quite an interesting science mission. This is all about mapping of the Earth for high resolution 3D Earth maps. It's looking at monitoring plate tectonics. So that's probably, it's in a circular orbit about 1,000 kilometers up, which still qualifies as being low Earth orbit. It's sort of about halfway in that range of low Earth orbit, which extends out to about 2,000 kilometers. So that's just, I think it's a reasonably interesting science mission, but that's probably all we need to say about that one. The other one was the Chinese one. And here we go, let's have a quick look at the launch for that one. So I don't know an awful lot about this one. In fact, I know hardly anything about it, other than it is a microgravity sciences mission. So another science mission, and all we've got here is just a fairly wide-angle view of the launch. That's just about it. And then just a quick CGI of the satellite deploying once it's in orbit. So as I say, I can't really tell you anything more about that. I would be interested to know if anyone knows more about this mission, about exactly what it is. But that's all I can tell you for right now. So that is the launches that have happened in the last couple of weeks. We've got a few others coming up, some scheduled ones. So one of them was actually, let's start with the first one, the Japanese one. This was actually supposed to launch today, earlier today. There it is, sitting on the launch pad, all ready to go. So this is a resupply mission to the International Space Station. So it was all ready to go, but then MHI Launch Services, which is the organisation in charge of this particular launch, tweeted out early today, the launch is postponed because we found a fire right around the hole at the deck of the mobile launcher. Also no good. So at the time they tweeted this out, they were trying to extinguish the fire. I assume that they did. I haven't heard anything else about it, but obviously that launch has been postponed, and I don't know, don't have any more updates than that one. So what else have we got coming up? The Chinese will be launching the remote sensing satellite tomorrow, actually. That one's due to go. The Russian one coming up, that's the Soyuz MS-15 one. Now, that is, you know, the test mission that went a little while ago with the robot on it. That was the one testing out the new configuration for the Soyuz spacecraft before they put people on it. This will be the first one with people in it and that configuration. And they will be launching a replacement crew for the International Space Station with 3 astronauts, so replacing half the crew. And that crew will consist of 1 Russian, 1 astronaut from the United Arab Emirates, and 1 from NASA. So 3 astronauts from 3 different countries. Now that other mission with the robot has actually returned to Earth now, and I'd meant to try and grab a quick video actually of that robot. Maybe I'll try and do that for the next show actually, because it was kind of cool. It just showed the robot up in space and then doing some tests within it, and it seemed to be working fine. That's the Terminator robot, in case you are troubling to remember which one that one was. So. Righto, now while I think about it, I was supposed to ask you at the start, like I'm doing every week now, to see if you can name that rocket on the left there. So hopefully it's not too difficult. Hopefully a few of you will get this. If you want to be really tricky, you can try and name the actual mission, but I'd be very surprised if anyone could name that particular mission. But anyway, see if you can name that rocket. What else have we got coming up? The Russians are going to be launching a communications satellite for a French company. Electron, the New Zealand one for Rocket Lab. I don't know what the payload is going to be on that yet, or the launch date. I don't think it's been announced. It wasn't last time I checked in. So we'll definitely have some news on that one by the next show, I would imagine. No updates on Virgin's Launcher 1. Starship, the SpaceX one, that carrying on from the Starhopper. Now that is scheduled to launch no earlier than October, so not too far away. So they've started filing the paperwork, and so everything is sort of progressing along with that one, but we will need to wait until at least October. By the way, if you ever see a launch schedule and it says that NET, that means not earlier than, or no earlier than. So at the earliest, we would expect that one to go in October. And the last one we need to mention is good old Mad Mike Hughes. What's going on with him? So he has put off his launch attempt until at least November. So this is the homemade rocket guy that's strapping himself to a steam rocket, the on-again, off-again flat earther. So I think we'll actually take him off our launch schedule for now until we've got some more news about what's happening there. So that is all of the rocket launches. Now I didn't give you much time, did I, to try and tell me what that rocket was. Did anyone get in there on Facebook at least? Okay, I don't think anyone has had a go at it, so I will tell you what it is. It is a Soyuz, which we were just talking about. This is an earlier version. This was way back in 2006 with a rotation to the International Space Station. Now, I see a couple of people are asking about the competition again. Angie's already answered, but here's a quick reminder of the competition question. What would you name the first tourist space station? So come up with a good name for a station that would look something like that. In fact, I should point out that in particular, I'm talking about a kind of space station that sort of looks like this. With the rotating space station, like 2001 Space Odyssey and a few other designs, quite a popular kind of design in science fiction especially, and I think it's a pretty good solid design for a space station. So see if you can come up with a good name for that. I see a few people are already having a go at it. The Low Orbit Inn, that's not a bad one. Okay, Space Hotel, because hotel and space together. Oh, and no one's done anything like Station McStation Face yet, have they? That's bound to happen. No, you're automatically disqualified. If you sorry, what was that?
You just gave them ideas.
I gave them ideas. Okay. There is one like that, is there? And just say that someone's already done it.
Space Resorty MC Space Restart. No, Resort Face.
Oh, okay, then you beat me to it. Okay, then we'll let you in. Righto, so we need to be talking about some more space news. Let's keep things moving along. Sorry, I'm still out on you guys there. Did anyone out in the audience have any ideas for the space station, for the name?
Alpha Junk.
What was that, sorry?
Alpha Junk.
Alpha Junk. Okay, thank you very much for that. Righto, let's talk about some space news now. The first one that we, after the launches that I wanted to talk about was India's attempt to land on the moon. So let me just get this, I'm going to start off with a video here. Let's see if we can go over and find that video. So we're going to be joining the India Today coverage of this. So hang on, let's just backtrack a sec. We have been following this mission for quite a long time. This is a Chandrayaan-2 mission to the moon. It has an orbiter orbiting around the moon. That's been there for a little while. The lander has separated from the orbiter, and it's supposed to go in and make an attempt to land on the moon. We've been following this for quite a long time now. I know you guys have been quite keen on this mission, so we're going to be joining the coverage a few minutes out, and I've sort of edited it a little bit. But at this point where we're joining the coverage, everyone's getting really excited about it. We're just a few minutes out. Everything has been going swimmingly well, and let's join in and see what is happening. Lots of happy faces.
Final touchdown. The thrusters have worked. Now it's the central thruster to ensure that moon dust does not rise. So the four corner thrusters are off and the central thruster kicks in. And look at that green line. That indicates that it's absolutely on the planned trajectory down to the last meter. Let's listen in.
Okay, we don't need to listen to the audio here so much, but what's happening there is you can see the red line is the planned trajectory to get it down onto the lunar surface, which is basically the bottom line there, and the green line is the craft itself. So it's all looking very good. There was a slight deviation there, but nothing to upset you too much. Everyone's very happy. There's the Prime Minister there. He's in the viewing room watching all of this. Lots of people getting very, very excited. And you can see it coming in there. Everything's all looking pretty good. They were very confident at this stage. But look here. The thing seems to be spinning around and rotating. No one's mentioning this, but that kind of doesn't look right. This is obviously a CGI there, but based on the telemetry from the spacecraft itself, so that's showing what it is doing. And now we see here, it's starting to take a little bit of a dive. I'll actually pause the video there, so you can see that it's no longer going on the optimal trajectory there. However, that doesn't necessarily mean it's all bad. What happens is about this point, the spacecraft itself has got some autonomy here. It's got cameras and sensors. It's looking at the ground on the moon, and it's figuring out if it actually is in a good landing spot. And the idea is that it can figure out for itself where is the best place within this range to land. So it's actually not that alarming that it would be changing its trajectory now, because maybe it's decided that actually I'm better off landing over there. But it's certainly something to keep an eye on. So let's keep going.
Maybe another few seconds, we should hear the announcement that the fine braking phase of operation has been completed. And we expect at the end of this, the vehicle to reach at an altitude of almost 400 meters. And the velocity
but it
right
stopped.
now, if you look at the plot, we have the Vikram lander has a horizontal velocity of nearly
That stopped as
48
well,
meters,
which indicates that we have lost telemetry.
meters per second.
Okay, so we don't know what's happening anymore. And these guys are starting to look a bit worried. Okay, it's not necessarily bad, but it's not great. Okay, this is a few minutes later. We're getting some pretty worried looking faces now. We should have heard something by now. Okay, you can the looks on some of those faces. Well, there you go. That kind of says a whole lot, doesn't it? Okay, there's a Prime Minister getting a bit of a briefing there. I've edited this, so we've moved on a little bit here.
There
Okay.
appears to be a slight deviation, anxious moments. We will have to wait for confirmation.
Confirm any signal from station.
So he's asking, confirm the signal from the station.
Stand by.
Stand by.
Negative.
Negative.
No signal from
No signal.
Madrid.
Well, damn. That's sad, isn't it? So, look, I'm just going to, this kind of went on for a little while. The Prime Minister got another briefing there. No one's really saying anything too much at this stage because, of course, they don't really know what's happening. But if we just keep rolling this, I'll just turn the audio down. A little while later, the Prime Minister leaves the viewing room, and it's all just, by this point, it's obvious that something very serious has gone wrong. And they didn't hear anything else. So, I tell you what, let's just keep going on a little bit here, because there's one more quick shot here that I thought was really quite touching. That's the Prime Minister and the Chief of the Indian Space Research Organisation. So the Prime Minister is giving him a good old hug and consoling him there. I thought that was quite a touching moment there. So it's not looking good, poor guys. Now, let me just pause it there. So we don't actually know what's happened. We still don't know, but there have been reports since then that the lander is actually intact. So they've managed to sight it from orbit. Apparently, according to the reports so far, it's intact but leaning on an angle. So maybe all is not lost, but it's very hard to imagine them coming back from this. If we haven't heard from it yet, if they haven't been able to establish contact, it's hard to imagine that they are going to be able to. So it's quite fascinating to know, to think about exactly what happened. How did it manage to land and stay intact? But we just don't know. So hopefully we'll have some updates soon. Of course, the main part of the mission is still a go. So this is a photo going back a little bit. This is before launch, of course. On the left there, the thing being hoisted up there next to the fairing, that is the lander, the thing that we were just talking about. But the other part of it there is the orbiter. Now the orbiter is still orbiting the moon, and that is still fully functional. So there's heaps of instruments on there. That part of the mission still looks like it's all good. And that's actually supposed to go for about another 7 years. And it's got I think it's got about 8 instruments. Yeah, 8 instruments on board, and that will be studying and mapping the lunar surface. So on the whole, you'd have to say this whole mission has been almost all a complete success. They got almost to the surface. Well, I guess they did get to the surface, just not quite how they'd planned. But basically, that's where it is at the moment. We're waiting to hear if they can re-establish communication, but it is really not looking good. Now, there is a small part of me, that dark, uncharitable part of me, that's thinking maybe there's a little bit of karma here for blowing up that satellite earlier in the year. Remember? Maybe I should be letting that go by now, but I just can't. I just can't quite let it go. So yeah, maybe that's a bit mean of me to keep bringing that up. And it wasn't these individual people that have worked on that. That wasn't their fault. So very tough on them. Just absolutely heartbreaking. Before we leave the Indians, here's just a quick overview of how I understand it. I think I've got all the main things here. This is the Indian Space Research Organisation's main plans for the years ahead. So 2021 hopefully will be India's first crewed mission. So the first time that they will be sending people into space in their own rocket. So they're looking at sending 2 to 3 astronauts in low Earth orbit for up to 7 days. So that will be a huge deal, obviously. It's not many countries that can put people into space in their own rockets. So we wish them all the best for that. 2023, they're looking at sending a robotic probe to Venus. Cool, I like that. We should be sending more stuff to Venus. Mars is what has traditionally been the favoured one to go to out of those 2 planets, but I would really looking forward to seeing another probe going to Venus. 2024, Chandrayaan-3, which is basically the successor to the one that we've just been talking about. It'll be interesting to see if they change their plans at all for that, but it looks to be a fairly similar sort of mission to the Chandrayaan-2. And then, of course, in 2030, the Indians are hoping to launch their own space station. So there you go. That, in a nutshell, is what the Indians are up to. I'm quickly keeping an eye on the chats over here because I can see the YouTube ones over here. I just can't see anything from Facebook. I think I'm seeing them all. Please say hello, Vikram, Poison Toad saying, wouldn't it be nice? We want to hear something from you, even if it's just to tell us what went wrong. Righto, Katie's asking for a rant. Not tonight, sorry Casey, not tonight, maybe coming up. Right, let's keep moving on with our news. The next thing I want to talk about, just a quick mention of SpaceX's test that they did a little while ago. This was a static fire test for the Falcon 9 booster. This is the one that's going to launch the Crew Dragon. So remember the Crew Dragon, the capsule that had the anomaly at the start of this year, or earlier this year, whenever it was. This is part of the launch vehicle that is going to launch that one. So we still don't know when that's actually going to happen, but at least this test went well. Of course, the big question here is what's happening with the actual Crew Dragon capsule, because that still needs to be cleared for flight. But at least this test went well. Another story about SpaceX here. Now, this one is actually about, the European Space Agency put out a number of sort of press releases and tweets, and this is quite an interesting one, really. This is the European Space Agency's one of their orbiting satellites, the Aeolus Earth Observation Satellite, had to do an avoiding maneuver to dodge one of SpaceX's satellites. Now I think they've got just a quick graphic here that shows you where those two satellites were going to intersect. Now the satellites that we're talking about, if you recall this lot here, we talked about that when it happened. It's their Starlink mission where they're launching, remember, thousands of satellites for high-speed internet access all around the world. We've covered this quite extensively on the show. This was a shot of them all in space before they were all deployed. So it's one of those satellites. Now what happened is that the European Space Agency had to move out of the way to avoid hitting it. And it kind of seems like they were a little bit annoyed about it. You're sort of reading between the lines a little bit. The whole thing was a bit funny, really. They had to perform a collision avoidance maneuver. They didn't mention SpaceX by name, but it was obvious who they were talking about. Now, it turns out that this whole thing of avoiding collisions in space between satellites is something that there's not really a good system in place right now for coordinating and avoiding things. So what happened here was that the Europeans emailed SpaceX, because that's how they communicate about this sort of stuff at the moment. You think you're going to crash into someone else's satellite, so you send them an email to try and negotiate who's going to get out of the way. So it's all very 90s, really. But SpaceX didn't get the email, apparently, because of some bug in their communication software. So it all got a little bit funny. SpaceX then released some message saying, yes, they'd heard about it, but they weren't going to take any action. And then it kind of looked like there was a bit of finger pointing backwards and forwards. And it seemed to get kind of a little bit messy, and a few people were taking sides and talking about who was at fault here. But the thing is, as I say, there's no actual real system for doing this. There's no particular rules about who has to get out of the way. It's not like, say, maritime rules where there are give way rules and stuff like that. There's not really anything in space. And of course, you don't want to be the one performing the maneuver, because you've only got so much fuel or propellant up there to be able to do this sort of thing. So you don't want to be wasting your propellant getting out of the way of someone else's thing. That means that you're reducing the lifespan of your satellite. So you want the other one to be performing the maneuver. So it was all a little bit interesting. But that's basically all it came down to, really, was that I think the European Space Agency did say down here, we need to be looking at better systems for this. And that's exactly right. So at least the conversation is now being had, and I think there's quite a bit of movement now towards looking at better systems, more automated. So we'll get back to this one. I think there's going to be some movement in this in the years to come, especially with so many satellites going up, especially these internet access ones. We're going to have better systems than sending out an email and hoping it doesn't get caught in someone's spam filter. It's probably not really the best plan. Righto, I see our time is moving along. I need to keep moving along here. So yeah, I don't think there was... I perhaps should just mention, I don't think anyone was actually really at fault here. I don't think SpaceX really did anything badly wrong here. But anyway, look, let's just keep moving along, shall we? So, next thing I wanted to show you, I think I've got a picture of this one actually. I hope I have, yes. Here it is here. Look at this picture. Oh, that's not a very good description, is it? Description. Sorry about that. I obviously didn't quite finish that off. But let me give you the description of this image. That's my template there to put in the description. So this is New Zealand by starlight. This is quite a fascinating thing. It's a lovely picture of New Zealand at night time. And I've got the link in the show notes, and this is where I got it from. It's a project called the Loss of the Night Citizen Science Project. You can go to follow the link and learn more about it. But these guys have taken some images from the only satellite apparently that is constantly observing the nighttime side of the Earth. And they've done some clever imaging processing to clean it up and give us this beautiful look at what New Zealand looks like in the night sky. That's all I'll say about that, because we do need to keep moving on here. As I say, link in the show notes if you want to go and learn more about that one. So let's keep moving on to another story. This is a medical story from space. I thought this one was really interesting, in particular because I love stories about research in space that aren't to do with space. It's a point that I keep making to people all the time, that on the International Space Station and other missions in space, a lot of the research that they're doing there has got nothing to do with space at all. It's to do with any kind of scientific research where you want to do it in space, basically because you want to get rid of gravity normally. That's what it's all about. So what's happened is that an Australian researcher had done some experiments, or done some observations, and noticed he'd used a simulator, a low gravity simulator on Earth, which is fascinating in itself, but I can't tell you any more about that, but discovered that 80 to 90% of the cancer cells died without any other treatment or intervention in this low gravity simulator. Wow, that's a fascinating sort of thing. And his working hypothesis at the moment is that in the low gravity or microgravity, the cancer cells can't sense their surroundings, so that they can't communicate with other cells. They can't move around properly, and so they end up dying. Wow, that's really quite fascinating. So only in the very early stages now, but they're hoping to do a lot more research on the space station and see if this might actually be some kind of cancer intervention. I guess the bad news is that you've got to go into space. If this is going to be any kind of treatment. So I don't know how practical it is, but fascinating nonetheless, and anything that helps us to learn more about how cancer works has got to be a good thing. So even if it doesn't turn out that you have to go into space to kill your cancer, maybe we might learn more about it for interventions back here on Earth. Right, the next thing I wanted to show you is related to our competition. So let me tell you about the Gateway Foundation. You may have heard of this before. It's an independent group of people. It's a foundation set up to look at building a gateway in space, which will include a very large space station. Something like the one that you can see there, although that's actually just the first version of it. They want to make a really, really big one of these rotating space stations. The idea with that is if you've got a rotating space station, you use a centrifugal force to create artificial gravity. Now these guys are very ambitious with what they're doing. I've got the link in the show notes so you can go and learn all about what they're doing. But they have decided to call their first version of the space station the Von Braun. Oh, I got it wrong, Carsten. I tried. Von Braun. Okay, Carsten out there in the audience is my go-to guy for trying to get my German pronunciation right. And as much as I try, I just can't quite seem to get it when it matters. The Von Braun space station. Now, I would be quite interested to know what anyone thinks about that as a name. Werner von Braun, of course, was the hugely influential person in the space program. I'm sure plenty of you know about him, but he is not without controversy. He has a controversial history, and I'm just wondering whether there might be a little bit of pushback on that particular name. I'm not going to... did you have anything you want to say about that, Carsten?
The point I'm always concerned about Werner von Braun is that he has quite a past with slave labor in his early days when he designed the V1 and V2 rockets in Germany. So he didn't really care about all the slave laborers he used for his projects.
Right. Okay, now apologies there, for some reason my crowd microphone's not really working properly, but Carsten was just talking about von Braun's use of slave labour going back in the wartime. So it's a checkered history, to say the least. So yeah, I wonder how people are going to react to that if we had a big space station with that name in it. Anyway, I will leave that up to you guys to decide what you think about that. So as I say, the link's in the show notes. It's quite a fascinating project. I have mixed feelings about these independent organisations that are trying to do these really big scale projects in space. I think there's a lot of merit in it. They get a lot of good ideas out there. Being independent from NASA and other government organisations gives them a lot of latitude to explore different ways of doing things. At the same time, none of them ever seem to have actually achieved anything concrete. So I sort of take it with a bit of a grain of salt. But it is a fascinating project and well worth going and having a look at. Now, Ange, do we need to go and check in on the Facebook comments at all? Anything interesting happening there?
No, it's all looking pretty good, just comp questions and yep.
Okay then, thanks for that. Just let me know if there's anything that we need to be talking about on Facebook. Crookie suggesting that whoever has the smallest mass should move. That's a good comment, Crookie. So when we're talking about those satellites, That wouldn't be a bad way of doing it, eh? Because it presumably would be cheaper. Would it also be fair to say they wouldn't have as much propellant on board? That's not a bad one. Or put your lasers on your satellite and threaten to destroy any who don't move. Yep, that's not a bad way. Let's just play chicken with them. Yeah. Okay, so what else do we want to talk about? Let's keep moving on. I want to talk about this mission. The Europe and, now who is it? The European Space Agency, NASA, and I think the Canadian Space Agency are all working on this mission to try and deflect an asteroid. So this is, I think, a hugely important kind of thing that we need to be getting on with. So this is, the idea of this essentially, of course, is if we've got an asteroid that's on its way to Earth, can we get it out of the way? So these guys are actually meeting right about now, actually, in Rome. So they're having a conference, workshop, seminar, whatever, over there to talk about how this whole project is coming together. So Asteroid Impact Deflection Assessment is the name of the whole project. So it is an international effort. Now NASA is going to be launching their DART mission in 2021, and the idea is that it will impact in 2022. So the idea with this is that it's going to go, I think there's some images of it down here. I can't play you the video, but yeah, so here it is here. So we have actually talked about it on the show before. It's a binary asteroid system with this asteroid and a smaller one orbiting it, and the idea is that the spacecraft will go in and smash into that asteroid and just try and divert it just a little wee bit just to see how it works. So NASA's spacecraft will do the impact. It will be accompanied by an Italian CubeSat, so a very small spacecraft, and that will watch the initial impact and see how that goes. And then the whole thing will be followed up later by the European Space Agency's Hera mission, which will do a more close-up analysis to see what has happened. So I think a great mission, really important, and something that we will definitely be keeping a close eye on in the future. Righto, what's next? We might not get through all our news tonight. I was worried that we weren't going to have enough. Where did I get up to? We need to talk about, let's just have a quick mention of this. So China's lunar rover that we've talked about quite a bit on the show has found something quite interesting on the far side of the moon. Apparently they have discovered a very strange gel-like substance that is in an unusual colour on the far side of the moon. We don't know what it is. The Chinese themselves, I don't think, have really said anything much about it other than they have discovered it. Some other observers are looking at the data and are guessing that it is something to do with meteorite impacts on the moon. So it seems most likely that it could be sort of melt glass as a result of meteorite impacts on the far side of the moon. Link in the show notes if you want to go and learn more about that. But this is another good result for the Chinese for their Yutu-2 rover, isn't it? Yutu-2 on the far side of the moon. They made that discovery earlier in the year. I think it was about May, of the moon's mantle, parts of the mantle on the surface of the moon. So they'd be pretty happy about the results they're getting from this rover. So when did this launch? This was early the year, right back at the start of the year. January 2019 that launched. So it's doing really well. Let's go out to Venus. Mysterious dark patches in Venus's clouds are affecting the weather there. This is more interesting than it sounds, I think. This is a slight mystery that's been around for quite a long time. So in the Venusian atmosphere, there are these strange dark patches that seem to affect the weather on the whole planet. So basically, the long and the short of this is we don't know exactly what's going on here, but one possible explanation could actually be microbial life in the atmosphere. So what we know of Venus's atmosphere apparently doesn't really explain what's going on here that well, but one possible explanation is a kind of microbial life very similar to what we get in Earth's atmosphere, up in the high atmosphere. So that's just one possible explanation that there could be some kind of life on Venus. So for that reason, it will be well worth investigating. Link in the show notes if you want to go and learn more about that. I have to keep moving on, so we can't talk about it anymore. I want to talk about Mars. So let's talk about ExoMars. So this is a mission that, let's just bring up another picture of it. I'll show you the rover that we are talking about. What a cool looking thing that is. This is the European Space Agency's ExoMars rover, which has now been named Rosalind Franklin. This is due for launch when? Yikes, I can't remember when it's due for launch. Is it next year? That would make sense, wouldn't it? Someone correct me if I've got that wrong. I should have had that in my notes. But this is Europe's first planetary rover, as in being able to rove around, to move around on another planet. It's been assembled by Airbus in the UK, and they've just finished the assembly there, and it is now being shipped over to France for its testing stage. So this is a really promising looking mission. I'm really looking forward to this one. The object of this one is to search for signs of past or present life on Mars. So this one has a 2-meter drill. The idea is that it can dig into Mars and look for life, which of course we think is most likely to actually be underground on Mars. The surface of Mars is not really hospitable. If we're going to find any kind of life there, it's most likely going to be under the surface. So there's a whole page about it there, link in the show notes if you want to go and learn more about what's happening with that particular mission. Now, the bad news is this is the one that had that failed parachute test recently, and there's been no official update on that, but the rumours are that the parachute testing is still not going well. So that's not good. I don't think they'll want to launch until they've done a successful parachute test. And of course, when you launch towards Mars, you can only do it about once every 2 years, the way the planets line up. So if they miss their launch opportunity next year, then they'll have to wait another 2 years before they can launch it, which creates all sorts of problems and cost overruns and everything else. So hopefully they'll have some progress on their parachute testing there. Now, just before we leave this one, as I mentioned, this rover has been named Rosalind Franklin. If you're wondering who that is, she was an English chemist whose work was central to the understanding of the molecular structures of DNA and some other things there, which is kind of relevant to what the mission is on Mars. So we're still talking about Mars. I want to keep moving on. We're talking about the Mars 2020 rover, the NASA's rover that is due to head to Mars. And it has just got its helicopter installed. Oh, I'm so excited about this. I'm pumped about the helicopter. I've been looking forward to this one for years. We've had a video that we show in the Space Center here, and that goes back years about having a helicopter on Mars and all the cool things you could do with it. So if you have a helicopter with a rover on Mars, that gives you a much better view of what's around you. It enables you to make better decisions about where to go and where all the interesting scientific targets are. So this is just basically saying that the rover is coming together a little bit more. They've had the helicopter that you can see on the top there being installed onto it. So we are one step closer to getting that one ready. So yeah, that was all about that one, but we still a couple of other things about Mars. Now, I included this story because in the last show we were talking about Mars losing its atmosphere. Remember that one? And I'd done those maths calculations to talk about how much Mars is losing its atmosphere over the years due to the solar wind. Well, coincidentally, this report has just come out where NASA is looking into exactly how, well, not exactly, roughly how much Mars is losing its atmosphere. So it's a fascinating story. We don't have time to go into all the details. It gets a little bit heady there. But in a nutshell, let's see if I can summarize this. What the study is looking at is isotopes of oxygen. So an isotope is a different version of an element depending on how many neutrons it has in its core. So some isotopes have more mass than others. So what happens in an atmosphere, you're losing parts of your atmosphere out into space all the time, and especially with Mars. So what will happen is that the lighter elements will tend to get stripped off and lost into space more than the heavier elements. So if you've got different isotopes of oxygen, then over time the lighter isotopes are more likely to get stripped off and lost to space, and the ratio of heavier isotopes will remain in the atmosphere. So you can use that as an estimate, assuming you've made a couple of assumptions here that in the past you had what you assume is a reasonable ratio of isotopes for a new planet, and if you've only got this kind of ratio now, you can kind of estimate how much atmosphere has been lost. Now, previously, we've been trying to measure the ratio of oxygen isotopes on Mars, but we keep getting different readings, and it's been a mystery. What the study has shown is that that ratio actually changes throughout the day. So that's a kind of a weird thing. I don't think anyone expected that, but it seems to be to do with the temperature. So I better check my notes here to make sure I'm getting this right. But the heavier isotopes will tend to stick to cold surfaces. So at different times of the day, depending on different temperatures, that ratio of isotopes in the atmosphere is going to vary. So NASA has now shown that that is actually what's happening. That's why we've been getting these different readings. We are now able to actually pin down what the actual ratio of those isotopes are. Now, that's as far as they've got. They haven't taken that any further and actually estimated how much atmosphere has lost, but this is giving us a new tool to try and work that out. So I thought that was pretty cool. Look, it's 10 to 8. How did that happen already? Let me just have a quick look at the chats here. Jay Harris was having a party during the moon landing, and noise. You were so excited about what was going on, the noise control had to come and interrupt your party. Good on you. Excitement about space, I fully understand. Right, I don't have time to go through all the other ones because we need to keep moving on here. We're going to have to miss some of these news stories and get back to them, I think. Let's just have a quick mention of this one. New models suggest that Titan lakes are explosion craters. Well, that sounds a bit dramatic, doesn't it? So this goes back to data that came from the Cassini mission to Saturn. And there were some readings taken during the Cassini's last flyby of Saturn's moon Titan, which is my favourite moon after our moon in the whole solar system. But basically the short version of this story is that Titan is the only place other than Earth that we know of that has stable liquid on the surface. It's liquid methane and ethane, but we have these large lakes on the surface of Titan. Now, the traditional models of how we think those lakes formed involved the liquid methane dissolving the ice bedrock and making these sort of big reservoirs or cavities, and that's where the lake formed. However, there are some lakes on Titan with really steep, high rims around the edge that don't really seem to fit those models. So it's been a mystery as to how they formed. Well, it seems now that they've come up with some new models that talk about the liquid nitrogen warming and becoming explosive and just basically blowing these craters. So there you go. That is one potential explanation as to how some of these lakes formed on Titan. Now, I'm thinking I might just have to skip a couple of these ones. We might get back to them. But now, someone was asking me earlier, Soren was asking me earlier today about the James Webb Space Telescope. So just give us a sec here. I'm just going to flip forward and see, I think we've got it here. So let's quickly talk about that. The James Webb Space Telescope, possibly the most exciting thing happening in astronomy right now. This is it's a kind of a successor to the Hubble Space Telescope. It's not just the same kind of telescope made bigger, but it is pretty much the next step after the Hubble. Now, as you probably know, it's been going on for years and years. It's been plagued by cost overruns and it's way late and everything, but it has now been fully assembled for the first time. So you can think of this whole spacecraft as being the telescope part that you can kind of see there, made up of all those hexagonal mirrors, and the other part, which is the main heat shield and other parts of it, they have now been joined together to create one big spaceship. That's all the images we've got of it there. So we're getting there. The next stage after this will be to join all the electronics together. Then it's got a whole other series of tests that it has to go through. So launch still isn't scheduled till 2021. So still a little way to go yet. I get so nervous about the James Webb Telescope. I'm really excited about it, but I get really nervous about how much is riding on this. Possibly the main reason being that unlike the Hubble Space Telescope, which is in low Earth orbit, this one is at one of the Lagrange points. It's out past the moon. So if anything goes wrong with this, if it doesn't deploy properly, there's no way of going out there and fixing it. So yeah, that gives me the jitters a lot. So hopefully everything will go really well with it, but boy oh boy, there's a lot of money tied up in this. And I think the thing that really worries me about it is if something goes wrong with this, I don't think we'll get another shot at a telescope this ambitious and this expensive. So wow, we really, really need this one to work. So anyway, it's all slowly coming together, and we are getting there. Now, I will show you just a couple of other quick images here. Now this one, we haven't got time to explain this whole thing, but this is something that I have shown on the show before. This is a graphic that shows our basic understanding of the evolution of the universe since the Big Bang. Each two-dimensional slice represents the three-dimensional universe at any point in time. So going sort of from left to right along there, you're looking at time, starting from where it says, or quantum fluctuations, inflation. That's essentially the Big Bang on the left, and then it's sort of moving through time to where we are now on the right. Now, we have talked a little bit in the past about how telescopes effectively look back in time. The further away you are looking, the further back in time you are looking, because it takes time for those light waves to get from there to here. So hopefully you kind of get that. If you don't, go and look it up. But the Hubble Space Telescope can see an awful long way into space, so it can see an awful long way back in time. Not quite back to where we think the Big Bang happened, but sort of getting there. The thing with the James Webb Telescope is that it is that much more powerful, and also because of the wavelengths it's looking in sort of longer wavelengths. So essentially you're able to look at things that are more red-shifted. So again, we don't have time to go into that right now, but what I'm getting at here is that the James Webb Telescope will be able to look that much further back in time, that we are looking right back around the time of the birth of the first stars and galaxies, which will be an enormous step, obviously, in our understanding of how the universe has developed over time. So just really, really exciting. It's the best thing happening in astronomy. I just wish it would happen. So that's what I want to say about the James Webb Telescope. Let's have a quick look at our competition again, because this is about your last chance to enter the competition. What would you name the first tourist space station? We've got any other names out there? Vomit Comet. Someone's suggesting the Vomit Comet. It's a nice name, but it's already taken, isn't it? That's the spacecraft. It's the aeroplane that they use to train astronauts, or you can pay to go in it yourself, that flies way up high in the sky and then just drops, and all the people inside get to experience effectively zero gravity for a short period of time. That's the Vomit Comet, and you can imagine why it is so named. Now, we've only got a few minutes left. We're almost out of time here, and I quickly wanted to mention that's in the night sky tonight. Look, all I'm going to say here is let's go and have a look at Stellarium, our planetarium software, and I'm actually going ahead a little bit in time now to the 14th of this month, and I wanted to point out the moon, because this month's full moon is known as a micro moon. So you've heard of the supermoon. This is the opposite. This is the micro moon, where we get a full moon, but it is at its furthest distance from the Earth. To be honest, I don't care. The whole supermoon thing and everything, I think, is rather overblown, and I could take a micromoon or leave it, really. It doesn't really matter to me. But if you are interested, that is happening this month, and I'm just going to come forward a day, or back a day to the 13th, and point out we've got almost a full moon here. Now, if we zoom in a little bit, we should be able to see, where is it? It's down here, Neptune. So can you see down there, the planet Neptune? Now, the reason I'm pointing that out is it's not particularly close to the full moon, but with a decent pair of binoculars with a reasonably wide field of view, you could actually get both of them in at the same time. And it's possibly not a bad time to try and have a look at the planet Neptune. Pretty challenging object to find. You can't see it with the naked eye. You can, however, see it with a pair of binoculars, or ideally a telescope. So if you were to zoom in on it, you can see it's possibly looks slightly blue. You don't count on that though, and it's quite near to this red star, so possibly not a bad time to get out there and see if you can find the planet Neptune. I think that's all we've got time for there. How are we looking with our competition? Are we kind of ready to do the draw for the competition? Because we need to get onto that. So we are going to call time on the competition. If you haven't entered that, you are too late, because Ange has got all the names in the astronaut helmet, and she is going to come up and someone is going to pull a name out of the hat. While they do that, I will just see if there's anything else I desperately needed to mention tonight. I don't think so. I think those other stories that we missed out tonight, we will actually be able to get back in the next show. So there we go. So Ange has got us a winner, I think. Who have we got?
That's the name she called it.
Jacqueline Marsh Legrand. The orbiter, Legrand. Okay, that's not a bad one. I quite like that one. So that was your entry. Thank you very much. You have won one of these things. One of the little sort of Lego compatible buildable space probe, and maybe a little something extra that we might chuck in there with it. Donated by Janet Yort. Thank you very much again, Janet. And that was the prize tonight. So look, we are basically at 8 o'clock now, so that is all we are going to have time for tonight. So we never did get the Facebook comments going. Really sorry about that. Sorry?
Yep.
Oh, no, sorry. Ange got the comments going. Ange was able to keep an eye on them, but for some reason, we just couldn't connect with Facebook. So again, just a quick note, if you have been watching on Facebook, just be aware that you may not be watching it live. It does tend to delay it, and if you are posting comments on there, we may not be seeing them because you are watching us from the future. So I know that does cause ongoing confusion. So with that, it is now 8 o'clock already. So we're back in another fortnight. I'm just going to reiterate that I'm hoping that the fortnightly thing is not a permanent thing. I don't fancy doing it fortnightly. I think weekly is the better format for the show. But for now, it'll be another fortnight before we have another show. Keep an eye on spacecentre.nz/live for any updates on that. I want to thank our live studio audience for coming and joining us again tonight. Thank you so much, guys, for coming along and being a part of this. Thank you, Ange, over there for all your help tonight. And thank you, everyone at home, for watching. Go and spread the word. Tell people to subscribe to us on YouTube because our subs are looking absolutely dismal still. And that is all we've got to say for tonight. So we will see you back here again in 2 weeks from now. Thank you, everyone. Good night.